Shocking CCTV footage, you won't believe what happened at midnight. It was a night like no other, the kind that grips your heart and twists your gut. Midnight fell heavy over the small town of Millhaven, where shadows danced under the flickering streetlights. Then came the scream, a spine-chilling sound piercing through the night, electrifying the silence. The local diner, usually a bastion of comfort and late-night chatter, sat eerily empty. Yet, the CCTV cameras rolled on, capturing something unnatural. In the darkness of the parking lot, a figure emerged, pale and unsteady, as if it had stepped from the pages of a horror novel. Its clothing, tattered and drenched, clung to its gaunt body like a second skin. The moment was surreal, almost dreamlike. As the figure stumbled forward, disbelief struck the few who dared to watch the footage. Cackles and gasps filled the diner, where patrons huddled around their phones, eyes wide and hearts racing, but it didn't stop there. No, that figure was not alone. From the shadows, two more appeared, as if summoned by some dark force. They lurched toward the diner, their movements jerky, unnatural. The camera flickered, and suddenly the air felt charged with dread. A chill ran down your spine just watching. Could they be real? The townspeople were engulfed in speculation and horror, whispers of curses and ghost stories buzzing like flies. As the footage played again, it showed the trio drawing closer, faces obscured, only ominous silhouettes cutting through the dim light. Witnesses reported the smell, rotting leaves mixed with something metallic. Eyes darted as the tension escalated. Questions piled up. Were they lost souls, or something far more sinister? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lunged towards the diner's entrance. Just then the lights went out, plunging everything into darkness. Gasps erupted, commotion swelled, and dread tightened its grip on everyone present. The camera, the only witness, continued to capture the unfolding chaos. Just as abruptly as the darkness fell, a beam flickered back to life, illuminating the diner, but the figures were gone. What had just happened? The urgency in their chests matched the thumping of the diner's old clock. Would they return? Or had something far darker descended upon Millhaven? The night was just beginning, and the mystery had only deepened. The unsettling silence that filled the diner was suffocating. Patrons, wide-eyed and breathless, exchanged frantic glances, their fears mirrored in the twitching of their lips. The calm atmosphere had fractured, and every heart raced, pumping fear through their veins like ice water. The old clock ticked loudly, a rhythmic heartbeat contrasting sharply with the tension enveloping them. As the camera preserved their anxious faces, a waitress named Linda, clutching a coffee pot, edged cautiously toward the door, her instinct screaming. Are we really just going to sit here? We need to call the police. She blurted, voice trembling. A few nodded in agreement, but most sat frozen, as if entranced by the possibility of what lay beyond those doors. Outside, the neighborhood remained curiously still, wrapped tight in shadows. The flicker of the diner's neon sign cast ghostly silhouettes against the pavement, but no trace of the figures remained. Just when the group thought the terror had passed, a loud crash echoed from the back of the diner, shaking the very foundation. Chaos erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as patrons scrambled to the front, urgency driving their flight. What was that? Someone screamed, barely holding back panic. The waitress dropped the coffee pot, its shattering sound lost in the cacophony of their fear. Stay together. The cook, Paul, shouted, his voice cutting through the din but not calming anyone. Everyone, to the back. But even in his attempt to lead, hesitation edged his tone. they all felt it, the oppressive weight of something sinister lurking just beyond the walls. Suddenly, the lights flickered again. They dimmed, then surged with a menacing buzz, illuminating the diner in a strobe effect that made reality feel disjointed. Just as swiftly, the lights went out once more, and screams filled the air. In those brief flashes, people caught glimpses of movement. Shadows, flickering at the corners of their eyes, returning to the periphery like whispers of nightmares. The sound of wet footsteps on the diner's grimy floor echoed, each squelch seeming to get closer. Then, with stunning suddenness, the lights flickered back on. The once empty diner was now filled with disheveled figures, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes staring blindly. Panic seized the remaining patrons as they backed away, seeking refuge against the cold metal of the diner's kitchen. "Stay back!" Linda shouted, brandishing a spatula like it was a sword. Paul grasped a butcher's knife, trembling in fear but willing to defend the group. "What do you want?" he yelled, his voice wavering between bravado and despair. What looked like a leader among them, the first figure from outside, took a step forward. Its lips curled in a haunting smirk as it whispered something unintelligible, a sound like crumpling leaves. The air thickened with the smell of decay, forcing them to cover their noses and choke back nausea. Then, abruptly, a distant wail pierced the air, reverberating through the diner like an echo of their own dread. It was a sound no one could ignore, sending icy spikes through their hearts. As the figure raised its hand, it pointed toward the front door, where the wail had originated. The meaning was clear: whatever waited outside wasn't done with them yet. "Run!" Paul shouted, a command laced with raw desperation. They bolted for the back entrance, spurred by instinct as their hearts raced with primal fear, but no sooner had they taken a few steps than the diner's entrance burst open again, and the air turned electric. There stood another shadowy figure, blocking their escape. A new terror descended upon them. What was out there and how would they survive this night of horrors? The clock continued to tick, relentless in its reminder: time was running out. Panic surged through the group as they stumbled back, uncertainty clouding their minds. The new figure at the door was a grotesque silhouette, twisting the shadows into something almost human but undeniably wrong. Its eyes glimmered with a soulless light, reflecting the desperation they felt in their own gaze. "Get back!" Linda shouted again, brandishing her spatula like it could ward off evil itself. "Stay behind me!" The cook Paul, who had been their makeshift leader, gripped the butcher's knife tightly, knuckles white. He edged closer to the frightened patrons, heart pounding like a drum. His instincts kicked in, choosing action over fear. "Look for something to defend yourselves," he barked, searching desperately for a way out. "We can't let them trap us." As if in response, the figure at the door took a step forward, revealing itself in the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. Its features were obscured, but an unmistakable sense of dread settled in the air, thick like fog. Then, from another direction, a third figure emerged, slinking in from the kitchen. The heavy, tarnished door swung open, creaking eerily. A collective shout rose from the patrons, and they scrambled back further into the kitchen area, sprawling against the cold stainless steel of the prep tables. "This way! This way!" Paul urged, pointing toward a narrow corridor that led to the storage area. If they could reach it, they might find a way out through the back or find supplies to defend themselves. But the closer they got, the louder the wails became, those mournful cries that resonated in their bones. Fear gripped them like a vice. The figures outside didn't just hunger for flesh, they craved fear. "Let us go," Linda urged desperately, pushing patrons through the narrow passage. "Move! Move!" With a sudden, instinctual momentum, they darted into the corridor, slamming the door shut behind them. The sound of nails scratching against the diner's facade sent chills through their spines. They could hear the dreadful whispers now, a chorus of anguish that melded with the creaking sounds of something breaking into their sanctuary. "How many are there?" one patron gasped, trembling, eyes wild. "Don't look behind you." Paul gritted through clenched teeth, glancing down the hall. We need to keep moving. We've got to find. He faltered, realizing that their options were dwindling. There wasn't time to think, there was only time to run. As they edged down the corridor, flickering lights danced above them, casting eerie shadows that leapt and darted along the walls. The air turned stale, thick with the scent of something rancid, invading their senses. Panic rose again. What if they're in here already? A voice whispered, barely audible, but the collective heartbeat of the group beat faster in response. Suddenly, without warning, a loud bang echoed from behind them, and the door they just shut rattled violently. Linda jumped, her spatula barely shielding her as the sound reverberated in their skulls. It was like a gunshot, a stark reminder of their reality, and they all huddled together, paralyzed by fear. Paul's eyes darted around, and he spotted a dim light coming from beneath a slightly ajar storage closet door. That way. He pointed, determination flooding his voice. As they rushed toward the closet, the banging from the door intensified, splintering wood and echoes of their impending doom sounding through the corridor. With a last push, they threw the closet door open and crowded inside, squeezing shoulder to shoulder, willful prisoners in their own world of chaos. Close it. Someone gasped, the air stale and hot with fear. With one last glance behind them, they shut the door tight, plunging themselves into darkness. But silence enveloped them for only a heartbeat before the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing filled the small space. What were they hiding from? Would they find escape or be trapped forever? The breathing echoed, thick and laborious, a sinister metronome keeping time with their escalating heartbeat. Darkness closed in around them, absorbing their terror and amplifying it, forming an unbearable cocoon. Paul pressed his ear against the cold, rough wood of the closet door, as if listening for any sign of an attacker. The others clung together, their breaths sharp and shallow, anxiety coloring the air. Linda's spatula felt ludicrous in her grip now. What good would it do against whatever hunted them? She felt her spine straightening, a flicker of determination igniting within her. We can't just stay here. Are you nuts? A voice hissed back, panic leaking through each syllable. What if they want us scared? Paul interrupted, his voice steady but laced with urgency. We can't give them that power. We need a plan. He pulled himself up, urging others to join him. How many of us are there? He whispered, trying to count despite the shadows enveloping them. 8, a voice trembled. But what if? Don't say it, Linda snapped, her heart racing. We need to maintain hope. But even as she said it, doubts threatened to smother her resolve. A raucous scraping sound ripped through the stillness. It came from outside the closet, sending ice down their spines. The door rattled again, harder this time, as if something massive and relentless was trying to push it open. What is that? Someone whimpered. Shoo. Paul urged, holding up a hand. Just listen. The scraping intensified, mingled with guttural growls that slithered through the gaps. The unmistakable sound of claws against wood. Something's coming. A voice quivered next to Linda. Stay quiet, Paul commanded, his own words trembling in his throat. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead. We'll wait it out. But deep down, the gnawing worry took root. How long could they hide? Suddenly, the growling stopped. Absolute silence fell like a heavy curtain. The air turned electric, charged with fear. It seemed too quiet, unnaturally so. Was that a whisper? Help me! It slithered across the dark, haunting and distorted, aching to pierce their protective bubble. A chorus of gasps erupted within the closet, eyes widened in alarm. Did you hear that? One patron blurted, nearly choking on the dread wrapping around them. Maybe it's a trick, Paul tried to reason, though his voice faltered. Don't listen. Before he could finish, the closet door creaked. It shifted slightly inward as if pushed, no, pulled. Their panicked breaths quickened, and the weight of apprehension became unbearable. The darkness was closing in, and whatever was waiting on the other side was patient, lurking. With a swift motion, Linda gripped Paul's arm. "We can't just wait here to die. We have to fight, be proactive. We can't let them take us." Paul hesitated, weighing the risk against their desperate situation. Then, drawing from a well of fiery resolve, he nodded. "Okay, on 3 we push out together." Together, the group chanted silently, their fear bubbling into a semblance of unity. As Paul slowly counted down, each number felt like a drumbeat thundering in their chests. 3, 2, 1. They heaved against the door, their collective weight crashing into it. The door flung wide open, revealing a dimly lit hallway, but it was empty. The monstrous presence had receded, lurking beyond the shadows of the diner. Had they escaped the grips of despair? "Run!" Paul yelled, darting through the doorway, and the others scrambled after him, adrenaline propelling them forward. They sprinted down the corridor, unsure of their destination, desperation driving their feet as they charged toward the unknown. Hell was at their heels, and salvation felt just out of reach. They could not linger, not now, but would they outrun the monsters in the dark? As they reached the end of the corridor, a bright light flooded in, and the air crackled with tension. Would they find safety or face an even more horrific revelation? A figure loomed in the light, silhouetted against the glow. Who could it be? A sign of hope or yet another embodiment of their fears? The figure stepped forward, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent glow. It was a man, disheveled and wide-eyed, sweat glistening on his forehead as if he'd just escaped from a nightmare of his own. "Who are you?" Paul's voice quivered as he tried to mask his fear. Are you with them?" "No. No." The man raised his hands, palms out, desperation etched across his face. "I'm just like you. I was hiding. I thought they got you." "Who?" Linda gasped. "What is going on? What are you talking about?" The man darted his eyes behind them, paranoia flooding his features. "We don't have much time. They can smell fear. You need to follow me if you want to live." Fear and confusion warred within the group. Paul exchanged worried glances with Linda. "We can't just trust him. Look." The stranger pointed urgently at the dark corridor behind them. "They'll be here any second. You can either take the risk or stand here and let them find you." With sharp breaths and shaking hands, they made the snap decision to trust this unknown man, engulfed by the sense of urgency that thickened the air. They stumbled in the direction he was pointing, their feet pounding against the cracked tiles, each step resonating like thunder. "Where are we going?" Linda asked, anxiety edging her voice. "There's a safe room," he replied, glancing behind as if the very shadows were crawling up on them. "It's underground. They can't get to you there. But we have to hurry." Dread twisted like a knife inside them, but the gravity of the moment swept aside their hesitation. Paul gestured for everyone to move faster, and they bolted down the hall, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously above them. "Why are you here? What happened?" Paul called ahead, trying to gather information while he could. "I was one of the workers here, the last shift before they closed. I saw what they did, what they brought in." His voice was frantic, filled with panic. It was supposed to be a simple delivery. But then they started changing. They were all human, and then his sentence hung in the air, uncompleted but heavy with meaning. Linda shivered, her grip tightening around her spatula. "Changing into what?" The man hesitated, his face paling. "They weren't human anymore. They were monsters. They took them all. I couldn't let them take me too." The clattering of claws echoed down the corridor, growing closer. The group exchanged horrified looks as realization washed over them. They weren't mere victims, they were now part of a nightmare that had reached out to claim them. Paul gestured sharply to a door on the left, an unmarked door that appeared partially ajar. "In there. Now." They pushed through, slamming the door shut behind them. Paul leaned against it, trying to catch his breath. The room was small and dark, filled with shadows that clung like ghosts. An old table sat at the center, cluttered and disheveled, as if it hadn't been used in ages. "Is this it?" someone whispered, their voice strained. "Not yet," the man said, panting. "There's a trapdoor under this," but before he could finish, a guttural roar echoed outside, shaking the walls, like a predator ready to feast. The sound sent chills down their spines. The man dropped to his knees, fingers fumbling frantically at the floor. "Help me. It's our only chance." Panic surged through the others as they gathered around him, fear consuming them in waves. The air thickened with the scent of terror, the weight of their impending fate closing in. Suddenly, the door shuddered violently, rattling on its hinges. It was only moments before the monsters would break through. Would they be ready? Would they escape? A primal scream echoed through the air, and with it, the one undeniable truth: they were no longer just victims. They were seconds away from becoming prey. As the door splintered, a glimmer of light shone through the crack, a flicker of hope or the last breath before despair. What lay beyond that door? Would it unleash the very horrors they feared most, or was it a chance to brace for survival? The door rattled violently, and Paul's heart raced as splinters erupted from the edges like fireworks. The man on the floor was almost frantic, his palms coated in sweat, his fingers digging into the wood. "Come on!" he shouted, urgency crackling in his voice. "We have to move. Now!" Linda looked at Paul, her eyes wide with terror. What if they get us?" "No!" Paul snapped, pushing back the fear clawing at him. They had come too far to be taken now. "We can't just wait here. We have to help him." With a quick decision, Paul and Linda dropped to the floor, helping the man pry up the loose boards that formed the trapdoor. An unexpected rush of air poured from the opening, sending a shiver down their spines. It smelled stale, like the remains of something long forgotten. The man's fingers trembled as he pulled harder on the edge. With one final, desperate yank, the trapdoor flew open. A dark, narrow passageway gaped before them, a tunnel that seemed to disappear into pitch blackness. "Go! Get in!" he urged. While Paul steadied himself, a horrendous screech echoed outside. The sound was like metal grinding on metal, a chilling prelude to the terror that awaited them. The door jolted again, this time with a crack that widened just enough to let in a sliver of light, and it was not the light of salvation. Shadows flickered in the doorway, twisting grotesquely, hinting at the horrors on the other side. Linda slid into the opening, her breath hitching as she felt the cold air brush against her skin. Paul hesitated for just a moment, glancing back at the quaking door, knowing he didn't have much time. "Are you coming or not?" Linda's urgent whisper pulled him back. He dove into the darkness after her. Once inside, a metallic tang filled his mouth, and he wrinkled his nose against the stench. They huddled in the narrow corridor, allowing the man to lead the way. He moved swiftly, his hands pressed flat against the damp wall for guidance. "Keep quiet," the man hissed. "They're listening." Paul tightened his jaw, every instinct screaming for them to move faster. The sound of claws gnashing and growls outside chased them deeper into the blackness. His heart pounded against his ribs as they proceeded, feeling the walls close in on them. It felt as if the darkness itself were alive, pressing in, suffocating. Linda grabbed Paul's wrist, her voice trembling. "What is down here? How can you be sure this is safe?" "There's an older system of tunnels," the man replied, not pausing his rush. "They lead out to the factory complex behind the building. It's our best bet." Suddenly, a loud thud shook the earth beneath them, vibrating through the corridor as if something massive had just crashed against the door above. Dust filtered down from the ceiling, and Paul flinched. They had to keep moving, they had to escape. With each hurried step, Paul felt the weight of desperation heavy on his chest. It wasn't just about survival, there was fear that the man could be leading them straight to their doom. Every nerve was on high alert, but logic faded as panic overtook them once again. The tunnel felt endless, stretching out into darkness. Then they stumbled onto a smaller chamber, lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, illuminating a wall marked with strange drawings. Symbols twisted and turned, beckoning them closer as if they held secrets of their own. "What are those?" Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. "Part of the operation," the man said, his eyes riveted to the wall. They were experimenting with something otherworldly. Before they could absorb the enormity of his words, the ground rumbled once more, and Paul felt a heavy presence behind them. It was growing nearer. "Run!" The man lunged for the other side of the chamber, urging them to follow. As they tore down yet another twisting corridor, the realization hit Paul: they were being hunted. Dark figures loomed behind, closing in as the flickering light faded into blackness. Would they find a way out or become the next victims? What awaited them in the depths of this dread-filled nightmare, and would they muster the courage to confront it? The echoing footsteps grew louder, and Paul dared not to look back. In that moment, he knew one thing for sure: they were only at the beginning of a nightmare they might never wake from. What loomed ahead? Was it hope or hell? The corridor twisted sharply, walls closing in as they hurtled deeper into the darkness. Each pounding heartbeat echoed like a war drum, drowning out the sound of their frantic gasps. Paul could feel Linda's grip tightening around his wrist, her touch a mixture of fear and determination. They had to find a way out. There was no turning back now. The flickering light danced behind them, then succumbed to the darkness. Paul stumbled, nearly losing his footing. Panic shot through him. He couldn't let her go. "Keep running!" he shouted, his voice sharp against the suffocating silence that followed. Ahead, the man led them into an even narrower passage, the smell of damp earth and decay thick in the air. "It's just a little further," he urged, his voice strained. A guttural roar rang out from somewhere behind, igniting their adrenaline. Paul could almost feel the hot breath of whatever hunted them. They sprinted through the shadows, every movement fueled by sheer survival instinct. The corridor seemed to twist and turn endlessly, almost mocking their urgency. "Over here!" the man shouted suddenly, pointing to a side door that appeared just in time. It hung half open, revealing a faint glow inside, an oasis in a desert of darkness. No time to hesitate. Paul pushed Linda ahead and barreled in after her, slamming the door shut just as a screech reverberated in the hall. They stumbled into an old storage room, filled with rusty machinery and boxes that looked as if they hadn't been touched in years. A sickly green light flickered on an ancient control panel, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "What is this place?" Linda whispered, her breath shaky. "Part of the underground factory," the man replied, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to leap from the shadows. "They used these tunnels for the experiments that got out of hand." Paul felt a pit forming in his stomach. "What do you mean experiments?" "Things you wouldn't believe," the man shot back, urgency embedded in his tone. "They were creating things not human, not animal. They were playing God." Light danced across the room as the door rattled violently again. The sound was not far off, bones crunching and claws skittering against metal. Paul felt bile rise in his throat. "We need to find another way out. Now." "Wait." The man gripped Paul's arm. "We can use this." He darted towards the control panel, fingers flying over the keys. "What are you doing?" Linda moaned, a flicker of panic igniting anew. "Looking for a way to shut them down." The man's voice was taut. "If I can access the mainframe, I can disable the locks or even release whatever they were keeping down here." "But what if it's worse?" Linda's voice trembled, uncertainty evident. Before Paul could respond, the wall shuddered again, and the screech that followed sent a jolt through his spine. It was a choir of voices, an echo of pain and rage that cut through the air. The walls felt alive, pulsing with a dormant energy that made him sweat. "Turn it off. Turn it off." Paul shouted. "If I shut it down without knowing what's connected, we'll all be trapped down here. Just let me think." The man hissed, frustration mixing with fear. Paul felt the weight of their lives hanging in the balance. "Do you hear that?" The noise was closing in, an undulating murmur that sounded all too hungry. Paul's heart raced. "We don't have time for this. We need to get out. Now." With one final flourish, the man pressed a button, and the flickering light above them steadied. The machinery hummed and whirred to life, a mindless beast eager to be awakened. Something stirred in the shadows. In that instant, the door let out a desperate groan, splintering as a set of clawed hands breached their sanctuary. Paul's eyes widened in horror as he saw what lurked outside. "Get back!" he yelled, yanking Linda away and pushing the man behind them. And then, silence fell, crushing, suffocating. They held their breath, the air thick with tension. The shadows shifted, and from within, something began to move. What emerged from the darkness was a nightmare ready to break free. And as its eyes locked onto Paul, he understood, there was no going back. Would they fight the horrors unleashed by their escape, or would they succumb to the monstrous darkness that awaited them? In that chilling moment, two paths lay before them. Only one would lead to the light. The creature that emerged from the shadows was a grotesque blend of humanity and beast, limbs twisting unnaturally as it stepped into the dim light. Paul's heart pounded like a war drum in his chest, drowning out any rational thought. Its eyes glowed with a feral hunger, an unholy light that chilled him to the bone. The creature's jagged teeth glistened, a promise of violence that echoed in the tense silence. "Run!" Paul yelled, shoving Linda toward the back of the room. As the creature lunged forward, the man fumbled at the control panel, desperately searching for anything that might help. "If I could just," he stammered, but Paul couldn't afford to hear more. They had to escape. Linda's panicked breaths were short, each inhalation a reminder of the danger closing in. "What do we do?" she gasped, eyes wide in terror. "Find something to block the door," Paul shouted. He scanned the room, searching for anything that could buy them time. A rusted pipe caught his attention. He dashed toward it, wrenching it free from the wall as he turned back to the door. The creature snarled, a horrible rasping sound, clawed hands scraping at the remnants of the door. The wood splintered, giving way to the monstrous force behind it. Paul hurled the pipe across the threshold with all his might, striking the creature squarely in the face. It howled in rage, stumbling back momentarily, and he seized the chance to wedging the pipe against the door, bracing himself and Linda behind it. "Is it working?" Linda's voice quivered as the door shook violently under the assault. "For now." Paul's voice was strained, every muscle in his body tensed as he leaned against the makeshift barricade. But he knew it wouldn't hold long. The man had finally completed something on the console. "I'm in. I can open the main door. Just a few more seconds." His eyes darted nervously from the screen to the door. Paul shot him a look. "We don't have seconds." The creature roared, clawing and pushing against its prison, rage etched in its features. Paul could feel the thumping of its heart in the air. Almost there, the ground quaked as the creature slammed against the door again, chipping more wood away. They had to act before the barricade gave out. "I'm getting the other door open," Paul shouted, fear giving way to instinct. He swiveled, leaving Linda with the barrier. The man resuming his frantic work behind him. As he approached the control panel, the screens flickered to life, revealing a series of incomprehensible images, horrors captured long before in cold, sterile moments. Creatures similar to the one behind them, twisted forms writhing in cages, eyes filled with desperation. "Paul!" Linda's scream pulled him back. He turned just in time to see the door buckling. Desperation filled the room as the man yelled, "I have to shut it down or we'll be trapped." "What do you mean, shut it down?" Paul's eyes darted between Linda and the screen, panic surging again. "Do it. I'll lose everything we could use to stop them." Another deep crack echoed as the beast pushed harder, now just feet away. Bile rushed up Paul's throat. "Do it. We can't think about that now." With a furious strike, the creature burst through the remaining wood, sprawling forward. But the moment stretched as the man made his choice, fingers slamming down with finality on the control panel. The room was flooded with white light, blinding for an instant. Paul flinched, bracing himself against the sudden surge of energy. A mechanical whir hummed to life, and the ground beneath them rumbled. The creature paused, its snarling visage glinting in the harsh glare, uncertainty mingling with instinct. A flicker of what looked like panic crossed its features before it lunged again. Then, everything began to shift. "What did you do?" Paul shouted above the cacophony, gripping the edge of the console in disbelief as the ground trembled beneath them. Just trust me." The man replied, wrestling with the controls. The creature stopped, eyes swirling in confusion, sensing an unseen change in the air. Then, a deafening roar erupted from somewhere deep in the shadows, a storm of chaos unfurling, the sound echoing across corridors. The creature's attention snapped towards its origin, a moment of fear breaking through its predatory instinct, but in that chaos, had they just unleashed something even worse? Paul's heartbeat quickened again, fear knotted inside him as he exchanged looks with Linda. They had to know. They had to find out. But would stepping into that unknown bring them freedom or doom? As the lights dimmed and the ground convulsed, they realized the very fabric of their fight was shifting, and the choice they'd made would ripple beyond their understanding. What awaited them in the deepening shadows as the horrors lay poised to break free? The dread of that question hung, heavy, as they prepared to face the darkness. The room was alive with noise. As the blinding light clashed with the shadows, a cacophony of shrieks and growls erupted from the depths, shattering the tense stillness Paul had clung to. The creature behind them, its grotesque figure partially obscured by the debris of the smashed door, hesitated. "Paul, what's happening?" Linda's voice cracked, drenched in fear and uncertainty. She tugged at him, clutching his arm as if he could shield her from the impending chaos. Before Paul could respond, the sound that had drawn the creature's attention grew louder, a chorus of anguished howls mixed with an unearthly wail that chilled him directly to his core. Something else was lurking in the darkness. "Whatever it is, it sounds worse than that thing," Paul replied, his voice tense. He stole a glance at the control panel, the screens now flickering erratically. The man was sweating, fingers darting across buttons, face pale with frantic determination. "Stay close," Paul urged Linda. They inched backward, the barricade weakening as the creature slammed into it again, its claws sizzling with rage. "Just a little more time," the man shouted back, twisting a dial that emitted a shower of sparks. Paul's eyes darted between the darkened corners and the impending threats encroaching from all sides. Then, the ground shuddered violently, knocking them off balance. Paul barely caught Linda before she stumbled. "Keep your head," he yelled, pulling her closer. Just as the creature roared, an eruption of malevolent shadows swathed the room as more twisted figures emerged from the darkness. They were past nightmares come to life, arms too long, faces blank yet filled with terrible woe, moving with an unsettling speed that defied logic. "Run!" Paul bellowed, shoving Linda toward the far wall. He braced himself, holding his breath against the rising panic. The man continued to wrestle with the controls, sweat beading on his brow as he fought against time. "Almost there," he muttered, eyes wide. "But they're coming in too fast." Paul's anxiety hit a fever pitch. What about the main door? They'll breach it. Was all the man could manage to scream as the shadows enveloped the walls. With every second that passed, monstrous snarls mixed with the chorus of tortured screams, echoing around them. The air thickened, turning viscous with fear. Something primal kicked in, the urge to fight or flee surged through him like a current. "Paul, look out!" Linda screamed. He jerked his head just in time to see one of the new creatures charging at him, its mangled jaw snapping impossibly wide. Instinctively, he ducked, narrowly avoiding its grasp as it sailed past, crashing into the console with a deafening bang. The impact sent a jolt of electricity through Paul's veins. He turned, desperation flooding him with each frantic pulse of his heart. We need to hold our ground. But the shadows continued to close in. The monstrous forms flickered like a distorted film, taunting him with their horrific presence. Paul! Please! Linda's voice broke through the chaos, her eyes wide with terror. Now! The man shouted. He slammed down the last button hard enough to crack the screen. And then it happened that a deafening wave of light filled the room anew, washing over the shadows. They shrieked in agony, writhing as they were pulled back into the dark like moths to a flame. What? Paul gasped, squinting as the world spun around him. The creature, both monstrous and terrifying, paused, eyes darting, sensing its impending doom. Paul's heart raced as he recognized the stark change. A flicker of confusion replaced its terrifying hunger. But in that moment, the pulse of their reality shifted once again. As the shadows receded, they revealed what lay beyond a hidden path leading deeper into the underbelly of this dark nightmare. Is this a way out? Linda asked, hope sparking in her voice, but a heavy fear lurked beneath. Only one way to find out, Paul replied, his instinct still screaming at him to flee. The man leaned in, face lit with a crazed glint, eyes darting between them and the walls as if part of him was already wrestling with the dread choice ahead. Do we trust this path? What if it leads us straight into something worse? Paul froze, but then the scream echoed again. One glancing look at the monster and the remnants of the shadows solidified his resolve. The risk was undeniable. With a decisive nod, he stepped toward the opening. We move now, or we don't live to regret it. As they plunged into the darkness, the roar of the creature behind them replaced by an eerie silence, one question lingered in Paul's mind: what horrors awaited them in that unknown abyss, and would they find the truth buried within the darkness or would they become its next victims? The darkness swallowed them as they plunged forward, the walls of the narrow passage closing in like a vice. Paul felt Linda's hand grip his tighter, every step sending a shiver through him. This was the moment they had fought for, but the uncertainty ahead felt like nails in his stomach. Keep moving, he urged, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. The distant roars had faded into the background, replaced by a deep, unsettling quiet that thrummed with potential danger. They darted through the passage, their footsteps echoing, each sound rebounding off the damp, stone walls. Ahead, a faint glimmer appeared. Paul squinted against the dim light emanating from a crack at the end of the tunnel. Look! He gasped, hope surging through him. They rushed forward. As they neared the source of the light, it grew brighter, illuminating a threshold that beckoned them like a star in a bleak sky. Just as they reached it, Paul halted. He peered through the opening, his heart racing. Beyond lay an enormous underground chamber filled with machinery, its steel architecture bruised with age. Dim flickering lights buzzed sporadically, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. It was a strange juxtaposition of decay and the unknown. What is this place? Linda whispered, awe mingling with fear. It looks like a holdover from whatever was going on above, Paul replied, glancing at the man who guided them. You know this area? Sort of, the man said, glancing nervously around. I never got too far, but they were conducting experiments down here. It should be quiet now they've been cleared out. I hope. Paul felt the knot in his stomach tighten. Hopes dashed frequently, they couldn't afford to let dread hold them down. Are we safe here? He demanded, needing clarity as much as he needed air. Safe enough for now, the man said, continuing to scan the room. But we need to plan our next move. They began to search the chamber, rummaging through pest-covered crates and scattered debris. The room was thick with dust, and every rustle felt like an echo of their fear. Over here! Linda exclaimed, brushing aside a torn tarp. They pivoted towards her voice, revealing what appeared to be an ancient map affixed to the wall. It was worn, the lines faded but clear, showing the way to the upper levels through a series of exits that circled back to the diner. "Can this lead us out?" Paul asked, tracing the paths with his fingers. "Maybe," the man replied, stepping closer. "But it's a maze. We'll have to be careful. They could still be lurking." "Then what are we waiting for?" Linda insisted, determination hardening her voice. "Let us move." Their spirits lifted as they gathered around the map. They had a plan, it was now or never. Then, a distant noise broke the moment, a low growl, echoing from somewhere outside the room. The tension in the air turned electric, sending their hearts racing. "They're coming!" The man shouted, urgency carving lines into his face. "We must go now." The group navigated the maze of machinery, Paul leading with Linda just behind him. As they crept along the narrow pathways, the growls grew louder, closer, each sound sending a new wave of fear that felt like ice down their spines. "Left!" he called out suddenly, ducking under a rusty pipe overhead. It was a gamble, but they had to edge closer to a chance of survival. Every beat echoed in his ears, the growls now morphed into a series of howls, a chorus of things that were once human. They rounded another corner, narrowly avoiding a trap set in the path. The air bristled like static at the realization of how close they were to being caught. Dazed by panic, Paul caught a glimpse of the figures creeping in the shadows behind them, mangy, but unmistakably not human, twisted by whatever darkness lay within them. "Faster!" he urged, pushing himself and Linda to the brink. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. They finally spotted an exit, a thick metal door standing in stark contrast to the shadows surrounding them. Paul reached for the handle, adrenaline coursing through his body. They could almost taste freedom. "Here. Help me," he called out. The others rushed forward, pressing against the door, panic fueling their resolve as they heaved with all their might. Finally, it creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase winding up into obscurity. "Go! Go!" the man shouted behind them, glancing back into the dark, knowing that the horrors were mere moments away. They scrambled up the steps, Linda fiercely holding on to Paul, each step echoing their desperate flight from death. As they reached the top, Paul shoved the door open, bursting into daylight, rich, vibrant, and impossibly beautiful, but they weren't safe yet. They sprinted across the diner's parking lot, their breaths ragged with exhaustion. The small town lay ahead, but shadows still lingered behind, a cruel reminder of hell chasing them. "Quick! Into the diner!" Linda shouted, urgency sharp in her voice. They dashed inside, fear pulsing through the air like an ever-present fog. Once inside, they slammed the door shut, hearts pounding like thunder. In the dim light of the diner, they huddled together, adrenaline transforming into raw emotion, the kind that swells when you've just brushed against death. Their surroundings felt normal, eerily so, yet the memory of the monsters still loomed. Silence fell, heavy yet soothing. It felt surreal, like they were in a dream, and Paul realized something profound. They had faced unspeakable horrors together, and in that, an unexpected bond had formed. As sirens wailed in the distance, clarity washed over him. They had conquered the night. Together. "I can't believe we made it," Linda whispered, relief flooding her voice. "Yeah. We did," Paul replied, allowing himself a small, shaky smile. As they embraced their fragile victory, the past few hours hung like a specter, twisted faces and haunting cries forever embedded in the recesses of their minds. But they were alive, breathing testimonies of survival, ready to face whatever else life would throw at them. As the sun began to rise, they stepped outside, hearts still racing, hands clasped in solidarity. They were warriors of their own story, survivors forging ahead, a reality ensconced in light, a pledge to never let the shadows ensnare them again. The town was waking up, unknowing of the darkness that lurked below. But Millhaven would forever be changed. And as they walked toward the horizon, the bond of their experience glimmered with hope, a light that would guide them when all else felt lost. "Now, this is your moment to take action. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any of our upcoming exclusive stories packed with excitement. Smash that like button now. It's the way to feed our algorithm, and help us grow this amazing community. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this heart-pounding conclusion, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this epic ending. Show your support, and let us keep this journey alive together.